My name's Jackie. I'm the Makerspace Manager at Swarthmore College, and thank you all for joining us for our screen print webinar. And we will be demonstrating this with the help of Andrea Packard in this gallery. So thank you so much, Andrea, for coming and doing this for us. And there are going to be a set of supplies list that I will give you from the supplies that I ordered for this webinar. The Makerspace is also a space that is available for you to use if you are approved to be on campus. So please check out our website if you haven't been, and I will let Andrea take it over.
Hi, everybody. I know you can't see my face very well, but under this mask, I am smiling. I'm really glad to see you all, and really refreshed and excited to be getting back to screen printing, which is something I've done. I did after Swarthmore. I worked at a print workshop doing silk screen printing with 6-year-olds, and I found that 6-year-olds are very careful with their X-Acto knives. It was the 12-year-olds who are a little careless. So if the 6-year-olds can do it, I think we can. And one thing I've really loved about screen printing is one can get really elaborate with equipment and photo emulsion and technical processes, but this is something you can have at your house very easily. You can, cut or tear stencils using tracing paper, pencil, and an X-Acto knife. And with a simple screen, you can make a variety of art. You can make various kind of pattern designs. This is a template that Jackie got from the internet. So we just did it as a test the other day. You can make your own cards and whatnot, or you can invent your own designs. You can print on paper. And today we're going to demonstrate with a nice Bristol board. So many of you may be familiar with lots of different kinds of paper, and when you draw on really rough paper, you'll get one effect. If the paper is very smooth, it'll be different. And this Bristol paper is a nice smooth surface that will take the ink very well. If you were to use a denser, thicker paper like watercolor paper, you get a rough effect, and that's not necessarily bad, but it's different. So today we're going to use this Bristol board, and we're going to use a screen. And so silk screens are just simply frames across which we have a mesh. And this is like a nylon mesh. Originally, silk was used, perhaps, but we use this. And if you look closely, it has very fine holes that let the ink go through. So what we're going to be doing is putting ink into the top of the screen and then using a squeegee to press the ink through the holes in the screen, and then that will go directly onto our paper surface. What we would end up with if we just did that is a rectangle. Clearly, you could use your screen directly and just put tape across it in different ways to block out the paint. And so if I were to put stripes across the screen, I'd get stripes across here. And the ink would go wherever it's not blocked by tape, or in our case, paper stencils. So you can easily make a paper stencil that's a lot of fun without any deep knowledge of drawing or anything. So the other day, or just earlier today, I just made this circle. And many of us have made, paper doilies and cutouts by taking paper and folding it and then cutting into it. And so for this stencil here, I just randomly cut shapes out of my paper to create openings. And I could put them through this hole that I made and then use that to print. So actually, I'm just going to do that right now. Sorry, two things I forgot to mention. You'll see there's some duct tape across the top of this. And that's because when you use a registration guide, which we're going to talk about in a minute, it can have clamps that cover up the top part of your screen. So when you go to take your squeegee, you might bump into those clamps, and you don't want your design to be under that area, which is hard to get to. So sometimes it's good to block off the top and bottom margins of your screen with duct tape. The reason you might cover the bottom, which I didn't do here yet, is when you are going to press the ink through, you're going to look for a 45-degree angle. And to do that, when you go press the ink all the way down the screen, when you get to the bottom, you can't maintain that angle because of this bottom edge. So you'll need to rotate your squeegee more to a 90-degree angle, and then you'll have a bunch of leftover ink at the bottom, perhaps, and you might scoop that up and bring it to the top. So that's why the top and the bottom of your screen, you might think of as kind of empty space, and make a design that fits more into the middle part of your screen. So give yourself some margins. Another thing before we switch screens is I made this very spontaneously, this circle, and through which I see the world now. And as you can see, the circle, my stencil is bigger than my screen in this case. It's not bigger than the other screen that I'm going to use later. The problem with that is, the way that the stencil is going to stay on our screen so we can print multiple times is the wetness of the ink makes the paper stick to the screen. But if I have a lot of paper that is not touching the inked screen, it will be floppy and could get caught on something, or the weight of it could just kind of make it want to peel away. So I'm better off if I cut my paper to match the size of my actual screen that's going to be covered with ink. So I'm just going to trim this to do that. And sometimes when you trim, you get good things that you can use for something else. Kind of like when you're cooking. All right. And you don't have to completely match it. And I'm rushing it a little bit, so I don't want you to get feeling impatient. Okay. So now I've got a circle. I think you can see, yeah, that's a little bit bigger. It's smaller than the outside edge of my screen, but it's bigger than the part of my screen that is exposed. Okay, so now I'm just going to sit this, this piece of paper on the paper that I'm going to print on. And now I think we could switch screens, if you want. Okay, all right, so when we're printing with we're going to print later with this method with the registration clamps. But right now, I'm just being very informal, and I've made this, very simple design. I put my design in the middle of my page that I want to print on, and I can move my little shapes around, like, oh, I don't like that. I think I'm going to move them closer, or maybe I'll move them apart, or maybe they should fit right in the middle, or I could put some other piece of paper in here. But I'm not going to be too fussy. I'm just going to play. And so I'm going to put this over that. I'm centering it, my circle in the middle of my screen. Then I'm going to pick some paint. And so we pre-mixed a little red with a little orange mixed into it. And what we're using today is, should I look at you, Jackie?
Sure.
So I think I'm looking at the screen. I don't know which is better. This ink is Speedball printmaking ink, and it's made for fabric printing, and which is fine for paper. But if you want to print a t-shirt or something like that, be sure you get ink that is made for fabric. So fabric ink can go on other things, but if you use other kinds of ink on fabric, you may have a washout. So, and if you do decide to print t-shirts, there's a way to set the color after you print it. So you do want to You can look online, but generally it involves throwing the shirt in the dryer for about 20 minutes on high or ironing it. So that kind of information we can maybe post later if you're interested. Anyway, Speedball's fine. Lots of great different kinds of ink. A thing to know is that right out of the jar, the jar contains ink, but also a medium that is transparent. So the color in the container is a little bit more opaque than it will look on the print. So you can sometimes do a little test on a side piece of paper to see what your ink will really look like before you put it down. But we'll see that color soon enough. So I'm using the spatula to put a bunch of paint at the top edge of my screen. Okay, then I'm going to put my ink somewhere else. And then I'm going to take the spatula, or the squeegee, I should say. That's spatula. So this squeegee would work, be hard to use with this print because it is not as wide as my circle. So if I do that, I will have to do a streak down, like I'll squeegee down, and then I do another one, and I get vertical lines. If you want that, then this is the way to go. If you have another squeegee that's too big, that's not going to work either. In that case, I should have set it up to go this way, right? So now we have a situation where I'm going to probably go with this one, but that's okay because this is our experimental one. But that's just something to think about. So you don't want to put, if anything, I put a little too much ink out. So I'm just going to use that 45-degree angle, and I'm holding this down with my hand because we are not clamped, right? So I don't really want my screen to move as I pull. So I'm going to lightly pull across, and then I'm scooping up, and I'm doing it again. And now I've done it twice. That should be enough, but usually on the first print, you're losing a lot of ink in the screen. So I might do it one more time. If you go back and forth too much, you run the risk of letting your paper get kind of abraded. So what am I going to do with this? I want to see what my print looked like, but I want two hands. So I need to have a place. If I just hold this upright, it's going to drip down, right? So I need to have a place to put it. I'm going to put it on this pan that I put out here. Now I want to look at my print, but I'm just going to take a peek at first because suppose I want to suppose it didn't come through properly and I want to give another pass. So I'm just going to, usually if it was clamped in, you could just lift it. But in this case, I'm going to peek. That worked out pretty well. So now I'm going to lift up my stencil and you can see the print and you can see the paper stencil sticking to my screen. So now we'll take this away for a minute so it can dry. And we have a clean piece of paper. Oops. And thank you. And then I could print another one. So I could just keep going. Or I could print, say I had a huge piece of paper across my table. I could print wrapping paper by printing, moving my screen over and over and repeating the pattern. I could do something fun here by printing part of this, I'm going to be devilish and just improvise, but see, I want to print it twice here. Okay. Give it some more. I think my screen moved while I was doing this. That's okay. Since this is an abstract design, I don't have to worry about being too fussy. See how that came through. And it helps if you're working on a flat, stable surface. This is a piece of cardboard that I could probably flip if I wanted to. Okay, now what happens if I put this down again, but the screen overlaps the wet paint, right? That would then mean that I would off-print from the paper back onto my screen. That could be something you want in certain circumstances, but in this circumstance, I don't think so. So this is a too nice piece of paper, but usually you would let your paper dry before overlapping, okay? So, but in this case, I'm just going to gently cover my wet print, and then I'm going to overlap. Do it again. I think I tend to do it more than is needed, but in this case, looks like it worked. Okay, then I'm going to lift up my other one. And there you've got two shapes kind of working together. And then the off print, you know, in some cases you might enjoy having a blurry off print that you can use in a collage or something. You never know, you could work back into something that with colored pencils. But for now, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to fold my paper. So I'm kind of using this like scrap paper. And I think I want to put a shape here. So no, that's going to be a little crazy. Let's do this. All right. One more time. And now I'm going to try something else because I'm a little low on ink. And I'm getting it off. I can get it off my squeegee like that, or I could use the spatula. But in this case, what would happen if I added another color? And I've got spatulas, but another thing you can do is you can use a piece of paper as a spatula too. You don't have to go spend a ton of money on a spatula. Okay, that's a lot of black. Got a little carried away there. Okay, then this is the other thing is this happens inevitably. So that's why I always have a bucket of water nearby. So if I need to, I can just rinse off my hands. Otherwise, it's a real disaster. So just make sure you're not getting ink all over your hands, because then when you handle your paper, etc., it's just sort of like a virus, and it gets everywhere. So, all right. So this is fun because when you mix the colors, you can mix the colors in your containers, or you can create a two-tone blend by putting them on the top of your screen. And at that top part where I said you might want to put some tape, another reason for putting tape is you can kind of create a blend here. Okay, so I've kind of done that, and now I'm going to pull it across. And the first time you do this, it's going to be a little bit streaky. And the subsequent prints will be more blended. Okay. So let's see how that came out. So now I've got something going here that I keep building on. But I think I'm going to put it aside for now and just do one more that just enjoys the color that I've got going here. Ah, that's another idea. Okay, last print. Sometimes these out of the colors that are right out of the jar can be a little garish. And so you might want to play around with color combinations or blends that refresh the eye. Ah, and look, there's the off printing that we were trying to avoid. So I really like what happened with the color, but obviously because I was doing a demo and not waiting for things to dry, I got my blend. Now you can say that's a disaster, but I like to save paper, and I often feel like one of the reasons for doing art is to see how you can turn mistakes into something even better than you thought of in the first place. So another thing to do with something like that is say, oh, how can I make that look more intentional? Is there some way to repeat that effect and add more of it? And then I could build up an area like that in another way. I'll save that thought for another time, but that's definitely something where you could create a stamping effect or something like that that would give this image a halo. So I'm going to put this aside for now. And then this screen can't really be used again until it's dry. So when you're moving on to another screen, what you need to have is a totally separate screen, or you need to rinse this out, et cetera, et cetera. So I am not near the sink, but I will show you that when you are by the sink, the first thing you'll want to do is take the stencil off. And I have a bag right down here. So you take your stencil off. And then when you take it to your sink, you can do this like in a kitchen sink or any kind of sink. If you have a vegetable sprayer, just be careful not to have it splash back at you. So it's probably better to let the water pressure start out slow when you rinse it out, and then gradually, as you get rid of the pigment, you'll be fine. But if you were to just spray it with a sprayer, it would, you could really send that pigment everywhere. Another good thing to do is to really, scoop the pigment out first before getting to the sink. So, does anybody have any questions before we go on to the next part?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So like you said, you're using nylon for this workshop. So I guess that's a plastic, right? Like, can you use any other plastic, I guess?
What you talking about, plastic spatula?
What kind of plastic are you talking about?
Like, I don't know if I heard you well, but Andrea mentioned at the beginning that when that the material she's using for the screen printing, that the screen itself.
Oh yeah.
What is in?
It's
Yeah,
a
what is?
mesh. It's a nylon mesh, and so you would specifically purchase a screen that's already stretched with that. No, this doesn't show you anymore. It's just a special kind of fabric that you could purchase.
Okay.
Screen printing fabric. If you were to Google that, you could make your own frame, your own screen if you want to. Either way, but it's nylon. It's not cotton because that holds up better.
Okay.
Yeah. So for your guys' reference, I just shared a Google Doc in the chat that has a list of all of the supplies that I ordered for this particular demo. There are many different options for screens and paper and squeegees and all kinds of ink and stuff, but I provided the list that I got together for this particular demo.
So one thing I just showed is how you can do a random geometric design. But some of you may be thinking, hey, I'd like to do something that has words in it or it's more elaborate. And Jackie has kindly offered to translate one of my designs or drawings to a paper template using the laser cutter. But if you don't have a laser cutter, I'll first show you a little bit more about what you can do. You can just use any kind of tracing paper to create your design and to use it with the screen printing to block out the ink. And so the nice thing about the tracing paper is you can draw directly on it, like a heart or whatever you feel like, or a picture of a face, anything. When you do that, you want to think in terms of shapes more than lines, because a very narrow line won't let the ink through. So traditionally, artists have thought in terms of these bold shapes and colors with silk screen. Of course, a lot of us want to get more detailed. And so I came up with this kind of, I was designing a quilt, and I came up with a design on my Photoshop that was in color. And then I translated it to black and white. And this is like too complicated for a silk screen, right? But I sent it to Jackie. I broke it up into two different layers. And instead of being 4 colors, it turns into 2 color layers. And even though this is incredibly complicated, she sent it to the laser cutter, and it was able to create a stencil. I don't know if you can see this. Yeah, I think you can. That's incredibly delicate. So it's a little bit too delicate and fragile, but to me, that's sort of the way the world is. So I'm cool with it. So I'm happy with it. And I'm not looking for a precise, my aesthetic isn't that precise and tight. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen with that. But say you just want to play around on your own and you had a picture that you liked. So I'm just going to use this as an example. You can put the picture down on your table and put the tracing paper over it, and you could trace the shapes that interest you. And as you do that, you could make changes. So like I have a very complicated array of shapes, but I might simplify these many lines into like one diamond shape, right? So instead of all this detail, I could just really simplify and bring out the big patterns. So, you know, those are examples of two really simple shapes, right? That could be cut out with an X-Acto knife. Now, probably a lot of you have used X-Acto knives, but if you do, generally it's just held like a, kind of like a pencil, and you always want to cut away from your hand. So you would take away whatever you were drawing on, work on a good firm surface like a piece of cardboard so you don't ruin your table, and start cutting out the shapes. And I won't cut out all the shapes very precisely, but you know, you create a window through which the ink can go. So when you have your design, whether you've done it laboriously and enjoyably with the X-Acto knife, or whether you've used the laser cutter, then you can either use the system I just showed you without the clamps, or if you have access to a system with clamps, you'll have an easier time. And this is why. When you lift up your screen, you can let go. And you want to be careful if you have too much ink on your screen. You don't want to go like this and leave it that way, because then the ink could dribble out the back. So this doesn't save you from having to be mindful, unfortunately. But it holds it up there. And then the other thing is every time you lower it again, it will lower in the same place. So then once you have your setup, you've got this piece of masonite, the clamps, the screen, you can get your piece of paper, and I like to make a guide for my piece of paper. So every time I put a new piece of paper here, I can put it, I use the 2 pieces of tape. Some people use 4 to kind of always put my paper there. That way, when I lower my screen, you know, I'll know it'll be centered under my screen. And if I'm doing more than one color, if I take a dry print and I put it back in there, I can align multiple layers so the shapes match up the way I want. Okay, so I've got my paper here, and this is going to be the first try of the stencil. Put my stencil here on top of the paper. And my stencil was cut like it's not a perfect rectangle matching up with my paper. So I'm just going to double check that when I lower this, there is not a gap between, like if the stencil were higher up, my ink would go through onto the paper where I don't want it to go. But no, this looks good. It's centered in my screen, and I'm pretty happy. Okay, color. What color should we use? Let's try blue. So I've got this kind of pure blue thing. Another thing to think about is, you know, the makerspace is a little bit dusty, frankly, sometimes, and but that's great. But if there's a lot of dust, you might want to think about how do you prevent that from getting in your ink and so on. Luckily, this time my squeegee size fits nicely with my print frame size. So before I get all down and dirty, I'm just going to double check. Do I need to look around my area and arrange things so I don't get into trouble. Do I have a place to put my prints in a minute or two? So I'm just going to get things out of the way. And I'm going to want some more paper, so I might pull a few of these prints. So I'm just going to move my drawing area a little bit. All right. And I made a spill here, so I covered up the spill with some tissue paper. So I don't just put a piece of paper down on top of the spill. All right. Let's see how the laser cutter did. So it's good to go at this with kind of an attitude, an open-minded attitude, especially at first. Okay. So now, there's something in this place where I want to put my spatula. So I'm going to come up with another place to put my spatula. Okay. All right, don't have too much ink to dribble down. My paper is good. Okay, so I see, for some reason, some speckles here. I think it's probably an artifact of the laser cutter.
That was from a first attempt at laser cutting this, and then had to pause and then restart, but putting the paper back in and not the same spot. So
Fine.
that's how that came.
That's fine. That doesn't necessarily bother me, but if it did, there are things you can do to mitigate that or prevent it. Another thing you might say is, I'm going to have a border around here that I could add later. So I think, you can, I don't know if any of you do theater or improv comedy, but a central principle of that is accept and build. So if somebody's, if you're acting and somebody says, you took my car, and the other person says, no, I didn't, and you say, yes, I did, and another person says, no, I didn't, you're just stuck. But with art and theater, it's all about, oh, yeah, but I just took your car for a minute. And then the story can continue. So I like to accept and build. So again, suppose you want to do it again. You would want to make sure that paper goes right in there. And you can make an addition. So an addition, say you put a lot of work into a design. One thing printmaking lets you do is make multiple copies or an addition. And they all are more or less the same usually in an addition. And so say if I made 10 prints, each one would be relatively special, but I'd have 10 instead of 1. And I could give them these gifts, I could sell them, whatever. And so the other thing I could do though is make each one slightly different. So obviously I'll get a pretty similar effect if I do this again, but I could do something different here to change it. So right now, I think I'll substitute this. This is truly experimental, but earlier I just found some paper in my car and I got a glue stick and I just glued it to this paper. And so I'm going to put it down here and see what happens if I print over that random texture. I think I'm going to need a little bit more at the top, not too much. All right. If you do this and you use glue, you just want to make sure the glue doesn't smear out of from underneath and then stick to your screen. So hopefully I didn't do that. So I would say it looks messy. I think it kind of looks good in areas, but it doesn't feel unified yet. So what I'd probably do is on other color layers would make this work better. But by itself, it's interesting, it's got potential, and I really like this, but there wasn't enough of it. I think it would have been even more interesting if that texture was more broadly spread out. So I'll do one more where we add another color. And then, let's see. So this is the blue. the same blue that I'm using now, but with a little bit of black in it and a little bit of green. So let's use some of that. Now, this is good. I don't know if you can see, Jackie, but do you see the white here? See, in this pass, you can really see where I had the new paint, but I didn't have enough of the old blue paint to cover the corner. So if that happens, before you lift up your screen, you have a chance to add a little bit more of the color you need in the area you need it and do another pass. It's always easier before you lift up the screen. Okay. So. Great. So I like it even better with the two colors mixing. And when you do this, the mixing of the color within the screen print, each time it's going to be a little different because there is a sort of randomness to how the colors mix. And it's progressive. So it becomes less like a print edition where each one is the same and each one becomes sort of like a springboard. Okay, so now I've got some paint on me. Go back to that. All right. Not sure where the paper towel is. Oh, yeah. So the other thing is we had wanted to do was we had wanted to print one of these yesterday and then print the other layer today on top of it to see how the two layers interacted. So I was going to print this with, say, a red and see the areas that the openings here that coincide with the blue there would turn the blue a nice purple color. And so you can make your prints 2-color, 3-color, etc. So we're not able to do that today, but I'll probably do that tomorrow and send you all. Anybody who wants to see how it turned out, I can do that. But it's really pretty experimental. I'm trying to think, are there any questions? I've sort of shown some of the basics already.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions?
If I were to go for my second pass, I'd be again using the same L-shaped guide to put my paper in the same place. And then I'd have to use the other template. I would have to put that on top of the now dry color, right? I'd layer it, I put it on top of my print and align it until it was in the right place. And then I would lower my clean screen and squeegee through the color.
Right, so we would be washing the screen after the first print, let the first print dry, then come with your clean screen for the second layer, and you can line it up where you want it to be.
Unless you have 2 screens.
Unless you have 2 screens, yeah.
So, anyway, I think it's a lot of fun. If you do want to print on t-shirts, what you want to do is put a piece of cardboard inside the shirt and then tape the arms of the shirt and the bottom, stretch them around the back of the cardboard and tape them on the back side so that there aren't wrinkles. So if you were to print on something that was folded or wrinkled, it wouldn't print as fully as you'd like.
Did you want to say,
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Once you use one of your templates, because the paper is kind of really thin, do you have to are you able to wash it, or do you have to make a new one entirely?
You do have to make a new one when it's a paper template. And that's where the laser printer is great because, you can still have your print file and all you have to do is make the laser printer do all that work. There are methods in silk screening where you can use a photo emulsion process. So you can draw on Mylar, clear Mylar, and then put the Mylar over the screen. Well, you paint the screen with a photo emulsion, and then you put the Mylar over that, put it on a light table, and which has a lid. You close that, you expose it to the light, and wherever your drawing was on the Mylar, that would block the light, and then the light would not expose that area. And so that area would wash out later with a hose. And so you hose out your line work, and the rest of the emulsion is rigid and firm, and creates your template. And then that can be washed out later with a different substance. But so that's a photo process that also, like the laser cutter, it allows for more detailed work. And it also, luckily, lets you use the screen over and over again until you're ready to do a new one.
So we have a question from Martin. He's asking, instead of doing a layer of blue and a layer of red, why not do a layer of purple? Is there an advantage to 2 layers?
Well, so the color is transparent. And so the advantage, purple is great. So go for purple. If you know you want a 1 color print that's purple, that's great. But if you do red and let that dry, and then blue, those 2 colors will look different on the paper. And you also have the option of having areas that are just blue, areas that are just red, and the parts that are purple are the areas of overlap. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, I can demo it just on paper right here a little bit. So here is, you might even have something that's a little bit dry.
So I think the big, what's really important there is that each layer is slightly different than the first. So the shapes that are cut out in the first layer are in a slightly different placement than the second layer. So you're going to get some areas that overlap and some areas that don't. So you'll get a combination of blues and purples.
I mean, this is a very rough idea, but there is a transparent blue over this red here. And so you have to experiment to see how your particular pigments will work with each other. Because sometimes, depending on the branded color too, the red could be really strong in some brands, or it could be relatively weak because they wanted to save money. So it's like chocolate. You kind of got to try it out and see if it's a good brand for you. I just encourage you to be really experimental. And at first, don't put too much energy into your design. Like, just do something like the circle exercise. You can trace a leaf or something that you just find around the house, cut it out, throw it on the screen, and see what happens and play with the color. Then as you get a little bit used to it, you can start developing something very complicated and see where that takes you.
Thank you, Andrea. Did you want to try it on the wood piece?
Oh, right. We thought, what would happen if we printed this on wood? Was this the piece here that?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see what happens. So we just had this brainstorm right before we started this, and this piece of wood is a little bit rough. It's a little bit warped, and it has a wood grain. And I think if I were to print something on this, I'd probably be better off choosing that big circle design rather than something as ornate and detailed as this design. But since this is on the screen right now, let's do it. I'm going to put this in the template. It's sticking up a little bit. And so I'm just going to reposition it, actually, because it's narrower. I can see through the openings in the screen to the wood. And in doing that, I realized the wood is a little bit more narrow than the design. So my design will spill off the wood a little bit. So let's put some paper under it just to kind of catch our drips. That actually will be more exciting to me. All right, let's do it. We've got 2 colors. You could do 3. You could put like a blob of black in the middle if you wanted to. See what happens. Wow, not bad. I kind of like it.
That's really pretty.
This may be a new direction.
Mhm.
What I like is the wood has a warm color that
Mhm.
contrasts with the cool. And anything with wood grain is beautiful to me. So, as I'm sure you'll agree, Jeff.
Yes, I definitely agree.
And you'll notice that, the margins are irregular. So what would you do then? You might let it dry and you might cut the margins to be more regular, or you might do something else. You could create a larger assemblage where this is just one component. The next one, you'd figure out how to register it so you could keep putting it down. You could see how it looked with different woods. And this does bring up the point that although this paint is transparent enough to overlap on paper and really bring out the white of the paper, it's opaque enough to really cover the wood where you see it. So it's a good thing about this paint. It's flexible.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, Andrea, it's Jeff. Can you mix the paints before you would apply them? So say you wanted purple, could you mix red and blue, or are those paints not really?
Yes, absolutely. So this color is a mixture of green and blue with a tiny bit of black, just to get a little bit more of an earthy turquoisey color.
Right. And are the paints that you would use on cloth, like t-shirts, would that be similar for those paints too?
Yes, so like these are fabric paints here.
Oh,
so
okay.
if you brought your t-shirt over tomorrow, we could print you a t-shirt.
Okay.
And Jeff, I just like, since you are a plant person, you can't see it yet, but these are cucumber magnolias. These are inspired by cucumber magnolias. So I just wanted to say that. I'm a big fan of a beautiful tree I saw recently. So I was trying to come up with a design that would honor this ancient tree I saw out at Glen Ford. So that's another thing. It's like, what do you want to do with this? What do you want to say with this medium? And it could be different for different people. But for me, it's like, I'd like to pay homage to this plant and my love of quilting. And so a good way to start is to be playful and random, but you could also have fun if you really think about, well, what am I valuing right now? What do I love? What's keeping me going? So I hope you all really enjoy thinking about that and coming up with your own designs.
Yeah. And I saw in the chat that some people are having trouble accessing the Google Doc, so I will follow up with you guys and email you the modified Google Doc after this webinar. So.
All right, see you in the makerspace, everybody.
Yes, please come to the makerspace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Take
Thank
care.
you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Paula.